Good morning. I'm Tom Byrne from Houston. Pleased to participate in this ongoing preparation for our chapter in June. There have been 3 already presentations of quality on our Spiritan rule of life, and I'm going to continue with chapter 4 today, but with quite a narrow focus on our religious vows as they represent a witness and in the mission of the Spiritans in this context of the society of the United States particularly. I have chosen the chapter document or the Spiritan Rule of Life beginning with number 50, which 50 to 55 simply states, if you allow me to read it as a pretext for this thought today, that we Spiritans, like all Christians, are called to carry on Christ's mission, to bear witness in the world to the good news. Our call is to religious life, and it's a specific gift of the Spirit to give our all, completeness, in the congregation to the service of the church. By the act of profession, which is free, public, and definitive, we commit ourselves to a life of chastity, poverty, and obedience, lived in order to witness to the kingdom of God, now and as it will be. Takes different forms, this commitment, among different peoples and in various cultures. So that's the pretext for this presentation on religious life as I perceive it. The question that shapes the whole presentation is, how are we doing in our life of religious life? And I suggest that the text that I'm going to present is to be understood in a context. And the text, I ask, not the reliable, loyal, devoted people to the Spiritans, whom we all admire and love, but to those who are knowledgeable and experienced with us, especially in the first instance, our other Spiritans, as they're calling themselves, on the email list that we receive through our sharings. Then I'm going to ask this question of how are we doing of ex-Spiritans who have walked away from us and who have taken a different route within the kingdom. And then I'm going to ask this question of how are we doing among those who seek the kingdom beyond the Roman Catholic way. And finally, I'm even asking some what I like to call respected pagans, good people who don't particularly have a religious bent to them, but who nonetheless perceive the quality and the value of our life. Now, why am I doing it this way? At this juncture of our province, the most observable fact to be faced is our lack of vocations. The lack of vocations is serious confrontation. And taking that as my sole criterion, I propose we focus on our religious vows as effective witness to the kingdom and as attractive means to service of our stated mission. So those 2 subtexts, witnessing to the kingdom by our religious commitment and our commitment to mission, is an attractive portion of that work. In the first instance, let's talk about chastity, which is in Numbers 57 to 59. We say that we are available to the poor and the needy, and that Spiritans live a style of life apart from others in order to be of service to the poor and the needy. Not exploring the effects of the sexual abuse concerns with regard to chastity, I'd rather focus on the primary purpose, the concern about human development, as males, to eliminate any obstacles or strains, for example, a too privatized reality that leads to sexual dysfunction. As we've heard in previous tapes, our community is there for the sake of support of each other, and there are concerns in this regard of comfort with these taboos of society that we are or are not facing honestly. There's an assumption also that celibacy can be a terribly hard institutional life, and that exploring these concerns will reveal to us, I think, how people perceive us. And the topics of conversation that we carry on among ourselves, the stories we tell one another and the public, reflect at sometimes a rather pompous attitude that we're above such scandal and that the constrictions of our lifestyle really don't raise serious issues. And then finally, there is, in regard to chastity and living the vow of chastity, certain laws and customs that stop closeness of intimacy. This is the perception of some of our people who observe us and who appreciate us, but nonetheless are truthful with us. In the second vein, concerning the vow of poverty for the sake of the kingdom, Numbers 61 and 62 say clearly that there is no virtue in poverty of itself, but it is a focus on simplicity of life that protects the Spiritan from gross materialism, greed, acquisitions for their own sakes. The question that I ask our observers and friends is, are Spiritans honest in these matters? The kinds of automobiles we use, the food we eat, the recreations we pursue, the vacations that we take, the quality of hospitality in all of our houses, and the care of our resources, properties, especially those that are not pertaining specifically to the congregation but are there for our use. In the popular mind, I have perceived that poverty is not just about money. Rather, there are fears and insecurities in living poverty, and these do not seem to be of any serious concern to us. Our friends and knowledgeable acquaintances say that the Spiritans seem to be not very much affected by insecurity. The congregation, in fact, gives permission for us to be with the necessities for our life and mission, but without being elite in any clerical privileged way. And finally, in regard to poverty for the kingdom, as yet there is no special commitment on the part of Spiritans to contemporary issues around ecology, eliminating waste, particularly endemic to consumerism. We throw away as much as everybody else. The third vow that we take concerns obedience, and the spirit and commitment to obedience is in Numbers 77 to 81. It's described as basically a commitment to dialogue among ourselves, to dialogue with those among whom we live, and to be in dialogue with the signs of the times. The dialogue with church teaching, which we all understand, is to be a means for us to free us from an urge to hold power possessively or immaturely, to exercise it in an arrogant way. So the question I ask is, see us becoming models of dialogue and dialogic obedience? The responses to this question were frankly a little bit disappointing. It does not appear that we are real You listen to each other poorly, was one comment. You have the necessity of letting go of some assumptions in order to hear your people, those you serve in parishes and schools. You are perhaps still perceived as somewhat clerically superior, which puts the conversation tilted toward your favor. And there doesn't seem to be among the Spiritans, as they live with each other and with us, a real cohesiveness. It's not there yet. We still have a fine theory, but the practice is wanting. So in summary, it has been a hard message to receive from, again, I say, ex-Spiritans, Spiritan friends, friends of the congregation who are not perhaps Catholic or sharing our values. And these observations, especially when they come from personal bias, are requiring a certain tolerance that we live in a mixed society, and there are some out there with bitterness towards us. The challenge then for us is to look beyond our own self-evaluations, to recognize the truth of these criticisms, and finally that the value of our religious life personally and its evangelizing potential is at issue when we explore this one issue of our lack of vocations. Again, I end with where we started, that our vows are public statements to be heard, and our commitments are meant to be perceived and appreciated. And so I challenge myself and others in the community to take the issue of the lack of vocation seriously and say, how is our religious life really bearing witness as it was meant to be? The vows are not specifically intended to improve anything in the relationship with God, but actually as a means of evangelization, a way of living in the world today. Let's continue our conversations. Excuse whatever narrowness this presentation perhaps has presented, but let it be a challenge to our approach. Thank you.